Welcome to the Lead Every Day show. Our mission is to see a world well led. And our strategy to get there? To empower leaders like you to lead every day. So let's get to work.
We've been doing this for a long time, and our research and our experience both indicate one thing. Most of the teams in the world are awful. What a way to start the show, Mark. Welcome to the Lead Every Day show, guys. I'm Randy Gravitt.
I'm Mark Miller.
And Mark, with that little backdrop there, I think your experience has been the same. We've seen a lot of bad teams in the world, but thankfully, we can have high-performance teams. And so if anybody's listening today and their team is not doing so great, I think some of the things we'll talk about today, we're going to help people get to a better place. So I'm fired up to talk teams today. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, it's going to be a great journey because, you and I, we've talked about this before. Our team journeys individually started as kids, and we've both been huge fans of teams our entire life, actually, not just our career. And so when I had the opportunity a few years back to actually study the best teams in the world, that was like putting the kid in the candy store. It was a dream job for me. And we worked on it for more than 20 years.
That's good. And we've learned some stuff. So I'm guessing you're saying if we're out there listening and our teams is awful, we shouldn't give up, right? I mean,
yes. Every team can go to the next level.
Yeah, that's good. So I think we've got maybe, half a dozen things today that we can share with people. And I believe these things they really can transform a team. And even for the teams that are listening that are at a good place, I think their teams can go to the next level. So what do you say, Mark? We jump in here and share some stuff that we've learned along the way. We've been studying this, as you said, for a while. So I think this can be a fun conversation, but a productive conversation for anybody who's listening, because most of the people who are listening are part of a team in some way, shape, or form. I mean, like you said, you and I've been part of a team since we were little kids, and we're still part of. There's a team of people that will put this out in the world even today. So I'm pumped about trying to help some people who are trying to lead teams.
Yeah, and let me just say this. We're going to be very, very tactical. And this is not an exhaustive list of what you can do to make your team better, but we are going to give you some essentials. We often refer to them as the basics, some real tactical things that you can do to make your team better.
All right, so you use the word basic. It makes me think foundation. And if I'm going to have a foundation for a team, it starts with the purpose of the team. You've challenged me for years. Let's always start with, what is the purpose of the team? What is needed? Literally, what are we all trying to do? But why would we need a group of people to do this if one person can do it? We probably wouldn't. We've got a group of people for a reason. We need to know what is the purpose for the team. So what would you say, Mark, about the team purpose?
Well, that sounds almost like a blinding flash of the obvious, right? Of course, every team has a purpose. But here's the tricky part. Many teams have not agreed on their purpose. Each individual member may have something in their head and their heart. They probably do. But until the team comes together, it's actually not a team. And I, unfortunately, have been in the room with a lot of teams over the last 40 years that when you push and you probe and you prod and you actually call the question, they do not agree on why they exist.
I love that reminder, Mark. It's crazy how many times I've asked a team. I've been with a team, and you and I both are fan of the 3x5 cards. Pass out the 3x5 cards around a table. Why does your team exist? And it is amazing how many times you'll have 8 people around the table and you'll get 8 answers. I mean, it's like they're different answers, not 8 the same. There's a lack of alignment so many times on a purpose. And I think if we don't really know why we're doing what we're doing or even what we're doing, it makes it really hard for us to accomplish our potential. And so, the purpose is, it's the starting point. Let's start with.
Yeah, and let me give you a quick sidebar here. And you and I have talked about this before. I was consulting with a senior team, and I sensed early on that not only did they have ambiguity about why they were in the room together, I had a real sense that they didn't have agreement on why the organization existed. So this is outside our team basics, but it's a prerequisite. You really need to understand why the organization exists. And I used that 3x5 card trick with that group around organizational purpose. And there were 12 in the room that day, and they had 12 different answers. And so we actually had to deal with that before we could then say strategically, therefore, what is the purpose of this team? So you may have to do a little bit of pre-work before you can actually confidently nail down what your team is supposed to do.
Yeah, that's good. I think purpose is important, Mark, because it actually tells us what we're trying to do, maybe even sometimes why it's important. But I think purpose is also important because it is a great reminder when we get in the fight. I mean, we all know we've been in team situations, the circumstances aren't so good. That purpose can keep us going. That's one of the things that purpose does besides just here's why we exist. It keeps us going when things get hard. It'll actually tell us how to spend our money. It tells us what to say yes to, what to say no to. So many things that purpose actually does. It's a lot like vision in some ways, a little bit different, but it'll do some of those things. Probably some other things you can think of that purpose is needed for. But I think this is it is. I like what you said. It is a basic. It is the foundation of the whole thing. If we don't know the purpose, it will not be very long till our passion will wane, we'll begin to drift. And how many times have you said no team drifts to greatness? It is so true. All right, so you got a second one here. We'll start with a purpose. Where do you want to go next?
I'd want a team to build a scorecard, because you may know why you exist, but once you start thinking about what are we trying to accomplish and how will we measure our progress, and ultimately how will we measure our success? We have said that we'll get to this in a minute about the great teams have great meetings. Well, 75% of those meetings need to be focused on performance management. Well, how do you do performance management if you're not keeping score? And I've again encountered far too many teams that aren't keeping score, or at least they aren't collectively keeping score. Most of the individuals are going to be keeping score. But again, back to this question of, are we in this together? Are we pursuing common goals? And the scorecard is just one of the most powerful tools that a team can have.
Yeah, that's great. I think so many times, to go back to your 75% in performance management, as opposed to there's a lot of information sharing that goes on in so many meetings, and nothing wrong with information sharing, but if that's what you build your meeting around, I'm not sure that you ought to be. In fact, I'm not even sure I call you a team at that point. It's more of a work group, probably. And so, I like the idea of we've got measurable stuff and we're able to monitor progress. That scorecard can be a powerful driver of performance.
Yeah, it lets you know what to problem solve. It lets you know when to celebrate. It lets you know the relative efficacy of your interventions. Let's say we do a problem-solving activity and we go implement something. Well, the scorecard is what lets you know whether you should do more of that, less of that, or chunk it all together and try something new. So the scorecard is a critical tool. Remember, the premise for today's session is that the performance of your team is not good. And sometimes the problem is as basic as you've not agreed on what are your key metrics. What does success look like? What's actually on the scorecard?
Yeah, that's great. All right, so you mentioned 2 or 3 times there problem solving. I think one of the things that makes a team turn around pretty quickly is if they begin solving problems together. And I would guess that some of the people who may have a team that's struggling right now, they may not be solving problems. They may just have a bunch of problems. Sometimes there are 2 problems. There's the problem, and then there's the person who should be seeing the problem is not seeing it. Maybe the leader sees all the problems, and we've not really taught people how to solve problems. But I think the most healthy teams that I've been around, they're constantly bringing their biggest problems to their meetings and solving those together, working on those. And we've got some models that we've actually taught teams that will help with that. But I think this problem-solving idea is a big idea, and oftentimes when we're struggling, it's because we've not taken the time to solve the problems. We just do a lot of complaining, and I say all the time, it's hard to go to a positive place with negative people. If your team is sitting around complaining about the problems and they're not really doing anything about it, I'm not surprised that your team is awful. So let's make sure that we're thinking about solving problems together. And you may want to unpack that a little bit.
Well, let me just say this. Yes, it could be as you described where people are complaining, but it may be that they're just not focused on solving problems. Maybe they're not complaining. I was the guest in a leadership team meeting. I'll never forget this. And the leader, the point leader, went around the table and everyone gave a status report. And one young man mentioned that he was having a problem that was rather significant. And he said, I talked about this in our last meeting and it's still a problem. And the point leader said, thanks for sharing that, and called on the next person. And so we went all the way around the table and everybody offered a status report. And once they finished their status report, the leader says, okay, any questions? We're adjourned. So it goes back to, I think there's going to be a theme here about having great meetings. Again, if you're going to spend 75% of your time in a meeting in performance management related activities, the lion's share of that needs to be on problem solving, where you do that together. Now, in that particular scenario, I asked the leader afterwards, I said, have you guys ever worked on a problem together? And she said, oh, yes, we did that about 6 months ago. I said, how did that go? She said, it was fantastic. And I said, well, have you considered doing that at every meeting? Like, work together to solve problems and improve performance. And that is when a team is at its best. I mean, if you list 100 things that a team does, they do nothing better than problem solving. And the reason I think that's true is because think of the diversity of perspective and experience and education and passion and personality, and all of this collective wisdom comes to bear. It doesn't matter how smart any individual member is. When you put all of those brains together, you just get a whole lot smarter and you get better solutions to your problems. And so if your performance is lagging, that's one of the first things I'd want to find out is how much time are you actually investing together on problem solving?
Yeah, that's great, Mark. Okay, so what if I'm that leader out there and nobody's ever taught me how to solve problems? It's likely that I've probably not taught my team how to solve problems at that point. We're most likely not bringing problems to the table if we don't even know. We just have a problem. Maybe we're not complaining about it, but we know we have problems. We're not really sure what to do. Could you say something to that leader who may be struggling to, how would I teach this to my team? Because we believe there are some models that you could use. Sometimes you have people problems. Sometimes you have problems that are not people related. There's a couple of models that we talk about. Do you want to take some time and lay some of that out for us?
Well, I don't know if we want to go into the model specifically, but let me affirm what you're saying, and we can go anywhere you want to go. I had a leader, a senior leader, veteran leader. I mean, a talented and gifted leader. He called me. This was just a few months ago, and he said, "My people aren't solving problems." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, they don't know how." And I said, "Have you ever taught them?" He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, I'm guessing you solve problems intuitively." And he kind of grinned and he said, "Yeah, we were on a Zoom call." And he said, "Yeah," he said, it's just something that comes natural for me." And I said, "Well, okay, good for you. But the men and women around your table, they don't have that same intuition. Oh, by the way, which is informed by 30 years of your leadership experience." I said, "You need to teach them." And he said, "Well, what do you mean?" I said, "Okay, think about the brain power of your team like a locomotive, like the head engine on the train." I said, where is that locomotive going without tracks? When you give your team a problem-solving model, an approach to follow, it's like putting that engine on the tracks. And you can go a lot of places and you can accomplish a lot of things. And so this guy said, okay, so I guess I've got to teach them. And you referenced, we've got several models we teach. One of them is very simply, you start by defining the problem, in specific terms.
Literally, what's the problem?
Specifically, though, as specific as you can get it. We often call it pinpointing the problem, because if you say the problem is sales, well, okay, what does that really mean? Is there a day part that's lagging? Is there one of your verticals that's lagging, or one of your products, or one of your services? Or is it certain people who aren't producing sales? So you want to be as pinpointed as possible. And then you want to try to figure out what are the root causes. That's step 2. Because if you solve for the wrong root cause, then you're actually not going to solve the problem. And third is you then look for, once you have multiple root causes identified, you pick the one that you think is most likely driving the problem. Now, it may ultimately be multifaceted, but you pick one and say, we think this is the likely greatest contributor to our problem. And then you start brainstorming solutions to eliminate or mitigate that specific cause. So if you determine that you've got a salesperson that's not selling their share, and you decide the root cause is, because they're new and nobody's trained them, then your solution set is around how to get training for this new person. See, that's very different than if you've got a product issue or a competition issue or a pricing issue. So you've identified a root cause, likely root cause, you've brainstormed potential solutions, and then you pick which of those are most likely to help solve the problem, and you create a plan. And then you execute the plan, and then you monitor your progress, because there's a real chance, if this is a complex issue, if this is a big problem, you may find that you've not yet solved it, which means you may not have pinpointed the problem correctly. You may not have identified the most appropriate root cause. You may not have come up with a credible plan. You may not have executed that plan in the fashion that you should. Or you may determine that you made some progress, but you didn't solve it because it's a multifaceted problem. You get to work through it again. Now, I've had leaders say before, that sounds complicated. Well, it is, which is why you don't engage in a problem-solving model of this type if you just got to figure out what color to paint the bathrooms. That's not when you use this. You use these type of models, most of the models that you and I would teach, Randy, you use them when it's complicated. And these are big problems. And those are the only problems you want to bring to the team. The little stuff, you want individual leaders working on those things outside the team meeting.
You know, I had literally $1 billion company I spent time with, and we taught them that problem solving model that you just mentioned, and they literally went and laminated that, just basically the train tracks, if you want to think about it that way. Those little questions that you ask, what's the problem? What's the root cause? Just literally put those on their boardroom wall. And every time they had a problem, when they were in a meeting, they just went through the framework. I mean, and it was that simple. And they began to solve problems together. It was crazy how much they were able to turn their team behavior around because they had this simple approach to that. I'll say a couple other things here, Mark. I think sometimes it is easy for us to complain about our problems. I mean, I hear this all the time. So many organizations or leaders will say, it wouldn't be so bad if we didn't have all these problems. I think problems it's our job. It's really what we do. We show up every day and we solve problems. That's what leaders do. Secondly, I would say, I want to remind people that the people closest to the problems are often closest to the solution. So if you're going to run that play and run that model, you may want to make sure that you're spending time listening to people who are closest to the problems, getting their input. You want to make sure you don't just make that decision in some ivory tower somewhere. You know, you're insulated from what's really going on, because it's so important that we allow people to weigh in on stuff. And sometimes some of the best ideas to solve problems come from those frontline employees. So I just want a couple of reminders there as we think about that.
Yeah, let me share one other thought. You mentioned laminating a problem-solving model, and I'm all in favor of doing that. I had the opportunity to visit IDEO, the global think tank based in Palo Alto. I was at their corporate headquarters, and they literally have their problem-solving model painted on the wall. So they took it one step beyond just laminating. And when you go into a meeting room, it's painted on the wall for the team to follow those steps. And they are one of the most creative and innovative think tanks on the planet, and they still use the chain tracks. My guess is that's one reason they're so successful.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so if I've heard you say it once, I've heard you say it 1,000 times, that if you could do one thing for every company in the world, it would be to buy them a flip chart. And the reason you say that, Mark, is because you're such a believer in action items, capturing and reviewing action items at every meeting. We're talking meetings again here, but the old who's going to do what by when, and we have all these great ideas and things happen in meetings, but if we don't capture who's going to do what by when, it's very unlikely that we're going to make the progress that we could. So maybe if a team's listening here and they're struggling, one of the best things they could do is go get a flip chart, get a whiteboard, whatever. Make sure, probably the flip chart's better because you can save the paper, but make sure that we know who's going to do what, who's going to own what, by when, and we keep reviewing those over and over. And it's amazing how when we do that, stuff starts happening, but when we don't, we can spin our wheels in mediocrity. So capturing action items, reviewing those, that's one of the most catalytic things a team can do to turn around their behavior. I believe that with all my heart.
Yeah, and I've just seen it happen over and over and over again. I would argue the defining moment in the history of some of the organizations I've had the privilege to work with were when they started documenting their action items. I know that sounds crazy, but I've literally had leaders tell me that they had gotten very, very good at talking about things, and they were awful at doing things. And just something as simple as what we're discussing. Now, I guess in today's world, you do it virtually, but you can have a virtual whiteboard in your Zoom meeting where you're recording real time who's going to do what by when. And when that happens, a couple things are at play that you may not immediately be aware of. One is it allows the entire group to agree on the action item, because a facilitator in virtually every case is paraphrasing and abbreviating things. Somebody might talk for 5 or 6 minutes, 10 minutes, a half hour, and somebody says, okay, have you got that action item? Well, then it's incumbent on the facilitator to capture the essence of it. And when they do that real time in a meeting, everybody can look at it and go, yeah, you got it right. Or, no, that's not actually what we have said. And I've had people say, no, that's not what I've agreed to. Well, see, this is part of the process. Is you write it down in the moment and everybody looks at it and everybody says, yeah, okay, that's it. And then you say, when are you going to get it done, to the person whose name is by the action item, and they give you a date. And so some of this is the accountability, the peer pressure, the clarification. You don't think about a lot of that when you write it down, but it is pound for pound the most powerful idea that I think you'll ever get from us on how to improve a team's performance.
Yeah. You've got a great story, Mark. Years ago, you were doing some consulting with an organization, remember? And y'all are having a day, and you can you tell that story about capturing the action items? That was really, I love that story.
Well, let's see if this is the one you're referring to. I'm old enough to have a lot of stories. I was in a meeting for my very first time with this group, and something was said that sounded like an action item. And so I jumped up and I grabbed a flip chart and I wrote it down, and I wrote the senior leader's name because it was obvious this was going to be his action item. And I said, when can you get that done? And the place just burst into laughter. Now, this wasn't my first rodeo. So I said, excuse me, is it not your custom to document your action items? And to the senior leader's credit, he said, no, it's not our custom, but it's a great idea, and I'll get it done by Thursday. Again, I think that was a defining moment for that organization, because the days of just talking about stuff and everybody leaving and doing whatever they wanted to do, those days were over.
Yeah.
And it was a good day.
Yeah, and it was a good organization. They just had the opportunity to go to great because they made that little change. And so if somebody may be listening, they've got a team. It may not be awful. It just may not be reaching its potential. And so that might be a tweak that we can do. And then if we do, we got one more idea here. Let's give people the gift of accountability. The senior leader said, I'll get that done by Thursday. We got to go back and check on Thursday. Did you get this done? We got to review those action items. We got to make sure that we reframe accountability. I think so many times, Mark, we think accountability is just people are in trouble. They're not doing what they're supposed to be, and they don't want accountability conversations. I think the best organizations reframe accountability, and we all agree together that as a team, we're going after this. We're trying to move the ball down the field together. And if we can do that, we really can make progress. That accountability really can be a gift. We've seen that over and over.
Yeah, and so let's link that to action items. So here's the way that we have used action items for decades, is not only do you capture them in the meeting, real time, you review them at the end of the meeting, be sure everybody's clear, nobody's had a change of heart. You then distribute them after the meeting, and then when you get ready to send out the next meeting agenda, they're attached, and there's a time slot on the agenda when it says review previous action items. And all of a sudden, people realize, oh, they're serious about this.
Yeah.
Now, let me play through a quick scenario. Let's say we're in a meeting and somebody hasn't done their action item because you're reviewing them, and you get to the third item and you say, hey, Randy, did you get this done? If Randy says, no, I did not. Now, this is assuming this was not a time-sensitive or critical issue. If it was, you probably need a different conversation. But if it was not particularly sensitive from a timing standpoint, and Randy says, I didn't get it done, then you say, well, give us a new date because we still need to get that done. So again, you're communicating in that situation. Randy's going to go, oh, this isn't going to go away. I can't just ignore it because they're going to bring it back up.
Yeah.
Now, if you get to another meeting and Randy has not done that action item, my suggestion, and I've actually done this, is say, okay, time out. Said, Randy, we talked about this 2 weeks ago. You gave us a date. You've given us a new date. What's up? Like, what is happening here? And I have seen the scenario when somebody says, well, I never really wanted to do that to start with. It's like, well, okay, then your opportunity, you've had two already. The first time when your name went on it, you could have and should have said, I'm not comfortable doing that. And then when it came up again, you knew it wasn't going away. So here we are. Now, the question is, can you get comfortable doing it? Do you need resources? Do you need assistance? Or, if again, depending on the situation, do you need us to give that action item to somebody else? And any number of things could happen. You could say, well, if Joe would help me because he's done this before and I really haven't, if he'd help me, I'd do it. Well, then you put Joe and Randy's name on it. Or you may decide, either the team decides, the leader decides to move it from Randy to Joe. But you have those conversations. And then I would end that by saying, okay, Randy, in this case, we've either partnered you with somebody or we've taken this action item away from you. But I would talk to the entire team and say, if any of you are ever unwilling or unable to take an action item, the time to say that is in the moment. We wouldn't have documented it unless the team had decided it was something that needed to happen. And so you can't just not do stuff that the team has decided needs to happen. And I think you have that conversation in front of the team. I've had it in front of teams, and I think it's the healthy adult-to-adult way to deal with situations like that. And again, you can begin turning accountability into something punitive, into the gift that's going to allow the team to accomplish all that you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, that's just healthy team behavior, the way you're describing that there, and I love that. Okay, so before we go today, we usually recommend a book. I think today it'd be appropriate for you to talk about a book that you've written called The Secret of Teams. We believe that there really is a framework to think about. You got a copy there. That's good. We love that. We've also, I will mention, if anybody's interested in reading that book, they can get that on the website, leadeveryday.com. But you and I've done a field guide on that book and a quick start guide. And I think there's a video series and all kind of stuff that we've done there around The Secret of Teams. But Just give them a little preview of that, will you?
Well, I'll give you a little bit of the backstory and then a little preview. We decided at Chick-fil-A, for those new to the podcast, I worked over 40 years at Chick-fil-A and a corporate. And about 25, 30 years ago, we realized that we had a real opportunity to take the business to the next level. And we began to explore this idea of how do you build a high-performance team, and worked on it longer than any project in my career. I mean, we worked on it for more than a decade before we wrote that book. And we were just trying to figure out what we've alluded to today. You've already heard some of the specifics, but why do most teams flounder and so few flourish? And there's a lot more than what we've talked about here today, but we outlined the basic elements required for success in this book. And it's true in schools and churches and businesses and sports teams. Randy and I both have taught this to sports teams. Randy's been the leadership coach for several professional teams. Great teams have some things in common. Some of the things we talked about today and more. So I'd encourage you, if you're interested in building your own high-performance team, you may want to check it out.
That's fantastic there. I love that. If anybody listening has not read The Secret of Teams, I hope you'll get a copy of that, any of those resources that might be able to help you. I think here's where I want to leave it today, Mark. I've always believed that when a team comes together, they actually set themselves apart. I think when I say come together, I'm talking about purpose and scorecard and problem solving, all the things that we talked about there. When we make a decision to be together on all this stuff, to be accountable to each other, to get stuff done, it is amazing what begins to happen. And I believe every single leader of every single team that's listening today, your team can go to another level. I'm not going to say that it's final level. I think it's a journey. We're always trying to improve our teams, ramp that up. And I would just challenge you to take one of the things that we've talked about today, maybe apply that, but go back to your team table, have some discussion around that. We said it earlier, no team drifts to greatness. They've got to be led there, and you're the leader. If you're listening, you're the leader. Do what you can to make your team as good as it can be, because let's face it, teams are what make organizations great. They really are typically made up of teams. And so the team thing, I love Mark's language there. Your team doesn't have to flounder. It really can flourish in this next season. We hope that some of the things that we've talked about today will help you. Keep hitting that subscribe button. If you've not done that, please do that. But keep hitting the like button, sharing with your friends and family. Thank you so much for being a part of our community here. We're going to continue to try to give you content that's going to help you in a practical way. We believe you practice your way to high performance, and your team really may need some practice right now, especially if you're listening and your team, you would say, is awful. It can be better. We believe it. We're cheering for you. Let us know if we can help. Remember, the best leaders lead every day.